Human picked up an alien girl's fallen crest. Her gentle explanation carried unexpected weight. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Jake Thomas had always considered himself an ordinary man. Born and raised in a small town, he worked as a mechanic, fixing the machines that powered everyday life. He wasn't a hero, and he never thought he'd be involved in something extraordinary. That all changed one fateful afternoon. It started when Jake was walking home from his shop, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. He was tired, thinking of nothing more than his simple life, when he noticed something unusual. There, lying in the dirt in front of him, was a shimmering crest. The crest was beautiful, unlike anything Jake had ever seen before, its surface glistening with an iridescent glow. He bent down and picked it up, the momentary weight of it in his hands strangely significant. As he held it, a figure appeared before him. A woman, tall and regal, with skin that shimmered a soft violet hue, her silver hair flowing gracefully behind her. Her piercing blue eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. Jake had no idea who she was, but there was an undeniable aura of power surrounding her. "You have my crest," she said, her voice melodic yet tinged with a hint of surprise. I didn't mean to," Jake began, his voice trailing off. The woman cut him off with a gentle smile, her presence calming him. "You did not harm it. You simply returned it to me." She stepped closer, her eyes scanning him, as if trying to decipher something more than his appearance. "You are human," she said, a curious note in her voice. "I never expected a human to have such honor." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. "I just picked it up," he replied. "It seemed like the right thing to do." The woman nodded, her expression softening. A simple action, yet one that carries weight. Her gaze lingered on the crest in his hands before she spoke again, this time with a tone that seemed almost reflective. "This crest belongs to my people. It is a symbol of my rank, my family. To lose it is a grave matter. But you," she paused, her voice dropping slightly as she looked at him with a new light. "You returned it without hesitation. Most would have kept it, sold it for their own gain." Jake felt the weight of her words sink in, and for a moment, he stood in silence, unsure of what to say. "I don't want anything from you," he finally managed. "I just saw it fall, and I picked it up. That's all." The woman's smile deepened, and she extended her hand. "You are different from what I expected." Jake hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand. There was something about her, something both captivating and strange, that made him feel as though this was only the beginning of something he couldn't yet understand. As Jake stood there, still holding the crest, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was unfolding before him. The woman before him, with her regal presence and mesmerizing violet skin, seemed to radiate an energy unlike anything he had ever felt. He had no idea who she was, but the way she looked at him made him feel like he was somehow important in this moment. "I should introduce myself," she said, her voice still calm but with a hint of curiosity. "I am Nyara, of the Astral Court." Jake blinked, processing the name. "Astral Court," he repeated, unsure of what she meant. "My people are from a distant planet," she explained, "and the crest you picked up belongs to my family. It's a symbol of my lineage." Jake nodded, still unsure how to react to the sudden revelation. "I didn't know," he said honestly. "I just saw it fall and picked it up." Nyara studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Most beings would have taken advantage of the situation," she said softly. "But you did not." "What?" Jake scratched his head, feeling a little embarrassed. "I guess I was raised to do the right thing, no matter what." Nyara's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to him. "That is rare," she said. "Most beings only act for their own gain. But you, human, you acted out of integrity. That is something I can respect." Jake was taken aback by her words. He wasn't used to being praised, especially by someone so different. But her words resonated with him. It felt good to be appreciated, even if it was from someone he barely knew. As the moments passed, the atmosphere between them shifted. Nyara, who had once seemed so distant and cold, now seemed to regard him with something akin to respect. She was not the aloof alien princess he had first assumed, but someone with depth, with a story of her own that she had not yet shared. "You said you were from the astral court," Jake ventured, trying to break the silence. "What does that mean?" Nyara hesitated for a moment, as though considering how much to reveal. "The astral court is the ruling body of my people," she said slowly. "We govern not just my homeworld, but several others as well. It's the difficult position, but one that I was born into." Jake listened, intrigued. "So you're like a princess?" he asked, his voice a little uncertain. Nyara's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was something sad in her eyes. "Yes, in a way, but I don't think I've ever truly felt like one." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jake could sense that there was more to her story, something she wasn't ready to share. "You don't have to tell me," he said gently. "I don't mean to pry." Nyara looked at him, her expression shifting to one of quiet appreciation. "It's just," she trailed off for a moment, her gaze moving to the horizon. "Being a leader, especially of a people as vast and diverse as mine, is a lonely existence. Sometimes, I wish I could just be normal." Jake couldn't help but feel a surge of empathy for her. It was hard for him to imagine what it would be like to carry the weight of an entire planet on your shoulders. "I don't think you're normal," he said with a small smile. "But I wouldn't call it lonely either. You've got a pretty incredible story to tell, I'm sure." Nyara's gaze softened, and she took another step closer. "You may be right, Jake Thomas," she said quietly, her voice warm for the first time. "Maybe my story isn't over just yet." The next few days passed in a haze for Jake. His mind kept drifting back to that moment with Nyara, the alien princess whose presence seemed to linger in the air long after she was gone. He had never met anyone like her before, so regal, yet so human in her vulnerability. She was a mystery, one that Jake couldn't shake, and the more he thought about it, the more he found himself drawn to her. It wasn't just her beauty that intrigued him, though that was certainly part of it. It was her strength, her quiet resilience, and the way she had spoken to him as if he mattered, as if his actions were more than just a passing gesture. He didn't know what to make of it, but he couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. One afternoon, after Jake had finished work at the shop, he found himself walking toward the same park where he had first met Nyara. His steps felt heavier than usual, as though some invisible force was pulling him in that direction. He knew she would be there. He didn't know why he knew, but he did. When he arrived, he spotted her sitting on a bench beneath the large oak tree, her silver hair shimmering in the afternoon sun. She wasn't looking at him, but the moment he stepped closer, her gaze lifted, and she smiled. A small, soft smile that made Jake's heart skip a beat. "Jake," she said softly, her voice warm. "I didn't expect to see you here today." "I could say the same," Jake replied, his voice a little more nervous than he intended. He stopped a few feet away from her, unsure whether to sit or stand. "I didn't think I would come back here either," he admitted. Nyara patted the space beside her, an invitation. "Sit with me," she said. "I find that I enjoy your company." Jake hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside her. They were quiet for a few moments, both staring out at the park as people walked by, oblivious to the fact that a princess and a mechanic were sitting together in the shade. "I've been thinking about what you said," Nyara began, breaking the silence. "About freedom. About choices." Jake turned his head to look at her, surprised. "You've been thinking about that? I didn't mean to go all philosophical on you." Nyara smiled again, but this time there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. "You have no idea how rare it is for me to have someone listen. Truly listen. Most of the time, people see me as a symbol, an icon. But you saw me as a person. You saw through all the titles and expectations." Jake felt a pang in his chest. He hadn't realized how much his simple act of returning her crest had meant. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "I just did what felt right." Nyara looked at him, her eyes softening. "That's exactly it, Jake. You did what felt right. And that's something I've struggled to find in my world." Jake didn't know how to respond to that. There was a weight to her words, a heaviness that made him want to reach out, to offer something, anything, to help her. "You don't have to carry it all alone," he said quietly, before realizing how it sounded. "I mean, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Nyara turned to him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he thought she might laugh or brush him off, but instead, she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said softly. That means more to me than you know. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Jake didn't know what it was about Nyara, but in that moment, he felt as though he had known her for far longer than just a few days. There was something about her that made him want to protect her, to be the one to ease her burden. And for the first time in a long time, Jake found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this chance meeting than mere coincidence. As the days went by, Jake found himself spending more and more time with Nyara. Their conversations had evolved beyond small talk, delving into deeper topics about their worlds, their struggles, and their desires. He learned that Nyara wasn't just a princess. She was a person caught between two worlds. One was the duties she owed to her people. The other was the yearning for something more than the roles and expectations placed upon her. Jake could relate to that in his own way. He had always been just another mechanic, just another guy doing his job, with no real aspirations to change anything. But Nyara's presence, her strength, and her vulnerability made him rethink everything. One evening, after a long day at the shop, Jake decided to walk over to the park again. He had grown accustomed to these quiet moments with Nyara, and he looked forward to seeing her. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. As he approached the bench where they usually met, he saw her sitting there, her silver hair glowing faintly in the soft light, her expression distant. She didn't notice him at first, so he stood there for a moment, just watching her. "Hey," Jake said gently, not wanting to startle her. Nyara turned her head, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Jake," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that made his heart skip a beat. "I didn't expect you tonight." He smiled and sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I thought I'd come by. We've been talking a lot, and I feel like I'm starting to understand you a little more." Nyara's eyes flickered with something like surprise, but she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she spoke, her tone thoughtful. "What do you understand, Jake?" He thought for a moment before answering. "You're not just a princess. You're someone who's been shaped by your role, by what others expect of you. But I can see that you want more. You want to make choices that are yours, not just ones that are expected of you." Nyara's gaze softened, and she nodded slowly. "That's true," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a burden sometimes, the weight of expectation. My people look to me for guidance, for leadership. But what they don't see is that sometimes I don't know the way either. Sometimes I wish I could just be free." Jake could sense the depth of her words, the raw honesty in them. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder in a comforting gesture. "You deserve to be free, Nyara. You deserve to make your own choices. You're more than just a symbol, more than just a ruler. You're a person, and that matters." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something he couldn't quite place. "Thank you, Jake," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "You've made me realize something I've been avoiding for so long. Maybe I don't have to carry everything alone. Maybe it's okay to lean on someone." Jake smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of connection he hadn't expected. "You're not alone, Nyara. I'm here for you, no matter what." There was a long pause as they sat together, the night settling around them. For the first time since they had met, Nyara seemed at peace, her shoulders no longer tense, her posture relaxed. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," Nyara said after a while, her voice quiet but sincere. "A human who doesn't want anything from me, who doesn't see me as a means to an end. You've shown me something I didn't even know I was looking for." Jake chuckled softly, a little embarrassed. "I'm just a mechanic, Nyara. Nothing special." She turned to face him, her eyes locking with his. "You're more special than you realize," she said, her voice low and serious. "You've given me something I've never had before, a glimpse of what it means to be truly seen." Jake met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, something deeper than mere words. In that moment, he knew that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. And, for the first time, he didn't mind. He wasn't sure where this connection would lead, but he was willing to find out. He was willing to be there for Nyara, to help her find the freedom she so desperately craved. Together, they could face whatever came next. As the weeks passed, Jake and Nyara's bond only grew stronger. What had started as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a quiet friendship, one that neither of them had expected, but both of them treasured. Nyara began to confide in Jake more and more, sharing her hopes and fears, her dreams of freedom, and the heavy weight of responsibility that came with being the ruler of her people. Jake, in turn, opened up about his own life, his struggles to find meaning beyond his work as a mechanic, and the quiet loneliness that had often followed him. They were two people from completely different worlds, yet somehow, they understood each other. One evening, after a long day of walking through the city, Nyara and Jake found themselves once again seated on the familiar bench in the park. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, and for a moment, everything seemed peaceful. Nyara sat quietly beside Jake, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You've changed something in me, Jake," she said, her voice soft but steady. Jake looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" he asked. Nyara turned her head to meet his gaze, her expression serious. "You've made me believe that maybe there's more to life than duty. I've spent so long being defined by my role as a princess, as a ruler. But with you, I see a different kind of life, a life where I'm not bound by expectations or titles, a life where I can be myself." Jake felt a lump form in his throat. He had never imagined that his simple acts of kindness would have such an impact on someone as powerful as Nyara. "You deserve to be yourself," he said quietly. "You deserve to live your life the way you want, not the way others expect you to." Nyara's eyes softened, and she smiled. "You're right," she said, a hint of resolve in her voice. "I don't have to carry this burden alone. And maybe, just maybe, I don't have to follow the path that's been laid out for me." Jake felt a sense of pride swell within him. He had helped her realize something important about herself, something that she had struggled with for so long. He couldn't help but wonder if he was starting to change too. As they sat together in the fading light, Nyara leaned her head against his shoulder, her breath steady and calm. "Jake, I don't know where this will lead," she said softly, "but I know that I want you by my side. Not as a protector, not as a servant, but as someone I can trust, someone I can lean on." Jake's heart skipped a beat at her words. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to be the one to help someone so important find their own path. But now, looking at Nyara, feeling her presence beside him, he realized something. He didn't need to know what the future held. He only needed to be there for her, to stand by her side as she made the choices that were hers to make. "I'm here, Nyara," he said, his voice steady. "I'll always be here for you." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their shared understanding hanging between them like an unspoken promise. In that moment, Jake knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in twilight. Jake and Nyara remained there, side by side, a quiet understanding passing between them. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As the days passed, Jake and Nyara's relationship continued to evolve. They spent more time together, exploring the city, talking about everything from the small, everyday things to the deep, philosophical topics that had once felt too distant for either of them to approach. Despite the vast differences in their backgrounds, they had found common ground in their shared experiences of feeling burdened by expectations, both their own and those imposed by others. Nyara was learning to let go of the weight of royalty, and Jake was starting to realize that his life, though simple, had meaning beyond the mechanics of his work. One evening, after a long walk through the city's bustling streets, Nyara turned to Jake with a serious expression. "Jake, I've been thinking," she began, her voice softer than usual. "I know we've talked about my role, my responsibilities, but there's something else I need to tell you." Jake looked at her, his heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fluttering feeling in his chest. Nyara took a deep breath, as though gathering her thoughts. "There are those who will never accept me stepping away from my responsibilities," she said. "My people, my advisors, they have their own expectations, their own agenda, and they will not understand the choices I'm making." Jake nodded slowly, sensing the depth of her words. He had always known that Nyara's path would not be an easy one, but hearing her say it so plainly made it all the more real. "What are you saying?" he asked gently. Nyara turned to face him fully, her eyes locking with his. "I may have to leave," she said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "I may have to leave everything behind. The crown, the title, the people. And I want you to know that it's not because of you. It's because I need to live my life the way I want, not the way I've been told to. Jake's heart clenched at her words. He had never imagined that Nyara would be faced with such a painful decision, one that could change her life forever. But as he looked at her, he realized that this was the moment she had been working toward all along, the moment when she finally took control of her own destiny. If you need to leave, Jake said softly, then you should. You deserve that freedom. But whatever you decide, I'll be here. I'll support you. Nyara's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to him. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think I could make this decision without knowing that you're here for me. Jake smiled, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and sadness. He knew that this was the beginning of something new for both of them, and that no matter what happened, their paths had been forever intertwined. You don't have to make any decisions today, he said gently. Take your time. I'll be right here, no matter what you choose. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Then, slowly, Nyara smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Jake's heart race. Thank you, Jake, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to find out. Jake reached out and took her hand, his heart full of hope. We'll face it together, he said quietly, his voice steady and reassuring. Nyara nodded, her fingers curling around his. And for the first time since they had met, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that whatever came next, she would no longer face it alone. The days that followed were a whirlwind for both Jake and Nyara. They had made a decision that would forever change the course of their lives, but the uncertainty that lay ahead still hung in the air. Nyara had chosen to leave behind her royal duties, to forge her own path, one that was no longer defined by the weight of a crown. Jake had promised her his support, and now, together, they faced the unknown. The decision wasn't an easy one for Nyara. Every step she took away from her former life felt like a betrayal to her people, to the legacy her family had built. But the more she spent time with Jake, the more she realized that the life she had been living wasn't her own. It had been shaped by expectations, by others who had decided her worth long before she could even understand who she truly was. For the first time, Nyara felt the freedom to choose for herself, and it was a feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. One quiet evening, as they sat together beneath the stars, Nyara spoke again of her choice. Jake, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, she said, her voice quiet but filled with doubt. Leaving everything behind, everything I've known, it feels like a dream, one I'm afraid I'll wake up from and realize I've made a mistake. Jake looked at her, his eyes soft with understanding. You're not alone in this, Nyara, he said gently. And there's no such thing as a perfect decision. But you're doing what feels right for you, and that's what matters. You deserve to live your life the way you want. Nyara turned to face him, her expression searching. And what if I fail? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. What if I'm not strong enough to live this life, to be the person I want to be? Jake reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. You're stronger than you think, he said firmly. I've seen that strength in you. And no matter what happens, I'll be right here. We'll face it together, every step of the way. Nyara's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time, she felt truly seen. Not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a person, someone who had the right to make her own choices. Thank you, Jake, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't think I could do this without you. Jake smiled, his heart full. You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I always will be. They sat together in silence, the weight of their conversation settling into a peaceful calm. For the first time in a long while, Nyara felt the quiet certainty that she had made the right choice. She wasn't running away from her responsibilities, she was running toward her freedom, toward the life she could choose, and the person she could become. And with Jake by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. The stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter that night, as if the universe itself was telling them they had made the right decision. And in that moment, Nyara knew that no matter where the road led, she was not alone. She had Jake, and together, they would create a future of their own making. As the days turned into weeks, Jake and Nyara began to settle into a routine that felt both new and comforting. They had left behind the life that had once defined them, and together, they navigated the uncertainties of their new world. Nyara, no longer burdened by her royal obligations, found herself exploring the simple pleasures of life, something she had never experienced before. She had always been surrounded by luxury, expectations, and duty, but now, as she walked alongside Jake, she felt a sense of freedom that filled her with hope. They spent their days walking through the city, visiting local markets, and talking about everything and nothing. For Nyara, these moments were a revelation. She had never known the joy of such ordinary, yet intimate, experiences. She had never known the beauty of living without the constant pressure of her crown. And through it all, Jake remained her constant, his quiet support and understanding, a steady presence she could always count on. One evening, as they sat together by the lake, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Nyara turned to Jake with a thoughtful expression. "Jake," she began, her voice soft, "do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" Jake looked at her, his face gentle. He knew what she was asking, the same question that had been on both their minds for weeks now. "I think about it," he said honestly. "But I also think that there's no turning back now. We made this choice because we believed it was the right one for us. We're not just living for others anymore, Nyara. We're living for ourselves." Nyara's eyes softened as she looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never imagined that a simple human like Jake would come to mean so much to her. He had shown her a life beyond the palace walls, a life where she could be free, where she could be herself. "I never thought I would find someone like you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Someone who sees me as I am, not as a princess, not as a symbol, just as me." Jake smiled, his heart full. "You deserve to be seen for who you really are," he said, his voice steady. "Not for the crown you wear, but for the person you've become. And I'm lucky to be here, by your side, as you discover who you truly want to be." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, in this quiet moment of connection. Nyara rested her head on Jake's shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. "I never thought I could be happy like this," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "But with you, I feel like maybe happiness is possible." Jake wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Nyara, and I'm here to help you find it, every step of the way." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft, golden light over the lake. For the first time since they had met, Nyara felt truly at peace. She had chosen this life, chosen to walk away from everything that had once defined her. And with Jake by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next, no matter what. They were no longer bound by duty or expectation. They were free, and together, they would build a future of their own making. As the days passed, the life Jake and Nyara had begun to build continued to unfold before them, each day bringing new challenges, but also new joys. They had left the past behind, but the memories and lessons they had learned from it stayed with them, shaping the future they were now creating together. Jake had grown accustomed to the simple pleasures of life with Nyara by his side. They spent their days in quiet contentment, whether it was strolling through the town, helping local vendors, or sharing stories of their respective worlds. Nyara, in particular, was finding freedom in these ordinary moments. She had always been surrounded by luxury, the weight of responsibility hanging over her like a constant shadow. But with Jake, she was learning that she didn't need the crown to feel fulfilled. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their small home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Nyara turned to Jake with a thoughtful expression. "Jake," she began, her voice soft but filled with a quiet intensity, "I've been thinking a lot about what's next for us." Jake looked at her, sensing the weight behind her words. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean, we've made this choice," Nyara continued, "to live a life that's ours, to be free of the expectations that once defined us. But I can't help but wonder, what comes after that?" Jake smiled, his hand reaching for hers. "What comes next is whatever we make of it," he said. "We've already chosen freedom, Nyara, and that's a bigger step than most people ever take. The rest of it will follow." Nyara's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand. "You're right," she said, her voice filled with a sense of peace. "I've been so focused on the future, on what I'm supposed to do, that I've forgotten to just live in the moment. I've spent so long worrying about what others expect of me that I forgot what it means to live for myself." Jake leaned closer, his voice gentle. You don't have to worry about that anymore. We're doing this together. And whatever comes, we'll face it as a team. Nyara looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, Jake, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For helping me see that I'm not alone in this. For showing me what it means to live, truly live. They sat there for a while, the quiet of the evening wrapping around them like a blanket. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Nyara felt at peace with the unknown. She didn't need to have all the answers. All she needed was Jake by her side, and together, they would face whatever came their way. As the stars began to appear in the sky above, Nyara rested her head on Jake's shoulder, feeling the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. She was no longer a princess bound by duty. She was a woman free to make her own choices, to live her own life. And with Jake by her side, she knew she was ready for whatever the future held.